right, welcome in. This is FST, Fantasy Sports Today. My name's Matt Striker. His name's Joe Pisapia, and this is the spot for you that are looking to dominate. What are you doing? Season-long fantasy? We've got you covered. You playing DFS and winning? We're here for you. How about just straight-up wagering? That's my ballpark right there. This is the spot. Really quick, to those that are new to the show, or if you've just forgotten, at SportsGrid. At SportsGrid TV. Those are the social media handles. Make sure that you're following along. A lot of information coming. Joe Pisapia, the author of the Fantasy Black Book. I get to sit with you each and every week. I'm such a lucky guy. Let's talk football, my friend.
The luck goes both ways. Matt Striker, it's great to see you on a Sunday morning. I was questionable coming in today after a week of being sick, but I did get a practice in on Friday and did the walkthrough yesterday. So I'm soldiering on. I'm on the field, giving it everything I've got. It's only week 3. We got a long season to go. But yes, Matt Striker, here we are. And there's a lot of injuries to get to. My goodness, so many things going on that are going to affect not only your wagering, but also your fantasy. So we got to talk about all of those things that are happening here. Some good news, too. Some guys that are coming back, which is nice to see. Wide receiver injuries all over the place here. That's something that we've been dealing with for the last couple weeks. Hopefully we get a little less of them going forward, but Deebo Samuel out for today, also along with George Kittle on that 49er team as well. You're going to be missing A.J. Brown this week. You're going to be missing, obviously, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp for weeks to come. So all of a sudden, the early round wide receivers look like a mash unit. It's been pretty rough out there in those wide receiver streets, and we'll help you with the waiver wire, see if we can give you some names out there that might be able to plug and play later in hour 2 of the show. But Matt, I think that's the thing. You look at the first round so far, you've seen CMC out. You see Puka Nacua out, A.J. Brown out. You've seen the Tua Tagovailoa injury possibly hurt the Tyreek Hill stock. I mean, it has been a tough start to the year for the first rounders.
Yep, absolutely 100%. And for those that win at season-long fantasy football, you understand that, yeah, you're going to invest draft capital on a lot of those big names, but it's what you do in between that really matters. And that's why it shows like this that really help, because eventually, inevitably, the CMCs of the world are going to go down. What do you do then? Do you scramble and go to your waiver wire and realize that someone else that's far more informed has grabbed a player? Don't be that way. So you're talking about wide receivers, the injuries abound. Later on in the show, we're also going to discuss how touchdowns overall are down. Does that mean that we should pivot to a more running back or tight end centric kind of strategy? We can have that conversation. But overall, it's still early. And Joe, you and I were talking before we came on the air. Week 2, a lot of wagerers, investors, they kind of lost a bit of their shirt. I think they're going to be coming back hard this week, and you're going to see how the league responds to that. So it's intriguing with a lot of touchdown equity taken off the board. It has to come from somewhere, or do we just invest in kickers? Joe?
No, never that last one. Okay. Ignore what he just said. Let me wipe your brain, Men in Black style, of ever doing that. But yes, there's definitely some pivot points we have to make. Sometimes week 1 is chaos. Week 1 this year was a little bit chalky. So therefore, week 2 is chaos. Now, some good things, some bounce backs certainly were there in abundance. And I think some surprises and some reactions that have happened too. And speaking of the first round too, I mean, if you've got Breece Hall and you watch Thursday night, and that was a short week, this is now 2 weeks in a row where Braylon Allen's starting to really work into this rotation. Yep. And all of a sudden, it's not just the Breece Hall show where he's getting all of the touches. That's a little concerning, I think. So you're going to have to keep with us all season long to get you through everything going on there. And if Allen's still out there, you should definitely grab him off your waiver wire this week. Also, a guy that's going to be hitting the bench here, at least for the foreseeable future. Carolina wasting no time. Dave Canales has seen 2 games, and he said, I've seen enough of Bryce Young, at least for now. He has been benched in favor of Andy Dalton. Now, Bryce Young, obviously, last year was struggling on a bad Carolina team. A new coaching regime has come in, but apparently that has not shaken things in a positive direction for the Carolina Panthers. That offense has been dreadful. They cannot score touchdowns. I'm trying to be PC. I'm trying to turn a new leaf here, Striker. But yeah, I mean, you look at what Bryce Young hasn't done so far, and I think Canales is basically saying, look, maybe it's time to sit and learn a little bit and watch the game from afar. And I do think at some point he'll get a second chance. The question is he going to be ready when that second chance comes around? And can this team support him from an offensive line standpoint? We know he's an undersized quarterback to begin with. They tried to give him some more weapons this offseason. They drafted Jonathan Brooks. We'll see if he comes back healthy in a few weeks. They brought in Deontay Johnson. But so far it's just been an awful start to a team that had low expectations. And Bryce Young so far has let everybody down. And if you look at what he's done and what he hasn't done so far statistically in his career, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. For a number one overall pick in 2023, in his career over 18 starts, he has 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. That's just unacceptable. And maybe he should have sat for a year, but that's not the nature of the NFL nowadays. Now it's, you got to come in, you got to start. Right. So there's already been rumors that some teams have been, poking around saying, hey, we'd be interested in Bryce Young if you're interested in getting rid of him. And I'm not shocked, Matt, if they go back into the draft this year and they are looking for the next quote unquote quarterback. They have done such a bad job with all these high picks that they've had. The question now is, what does Andy Dalton do for this offense? And in my opinion, at least he becomes like a serviceable veteran guy. Like maybe you get Deontay Johnson to get out there, get 6 catches for 60 yards. That would be great. We'd love double-digit points. I think he's flex-worthy this week. But how much of a turnaround, in your opinion, can Andy Dalton give immediately in terms of any boost whatsoever to this Carolina offense? Because it needs one in the worst way.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked the right question here. So from a fantasy perspective, I'm seeing on a lot of leagues that Chuba Hubbard is getting picked up off the waiver wire far more, and I understand the concept there. But here's the thing. From a wagering standpoint, I set aside a certain amount of my capital to know that I was going to have some sort of Panthers play each and every week. It's just one of those things. We joke about the Daniel Jones interception, even though it didn't catch last week. We're going to hit it again this week. This changes everything now. I think this makes the Panthers a decent team. You said it, Andy Dalton, serviceable. And that's what you need to be. Football is still one of the remaining games where having that veteran awareness, that leadership still matters. Most of the games are skewing younger and younger. We're wagering on speed. We're wagering on points. Here comes Andy Dalton into a position that still has its roots in that chalkiness, if you understand what I'm saying, from a betting standpoint. So I think Andy Dalton does change a lot of things. Am I running out and picking up everyone in his offensive ecosystem like you write about, Joe? No. But from a wagering perspective, it does make me say I'll put a little more respect on Carolina. Joe?
Yeah, I think from a wagering perspective today, there's still, underdogs by a touchdown. That still makes sense to me, especially after last week with the Raiders were able to do on the road against the Ravens. I mean, I think that's a huge win for a team like that. They know this is a game they should win here. Let's go 2-1 and start off the season right. Updates on Jordan Love. Jordan Love was practicing. Jordan Love was out there. There are a lot of rumors abound, but no surprise. Jordan Love's not going to play today. So you are going to get Malik Willis, which means you should bench all of your Green Bay Packer wide receivers if you can, because it's going to be ugly. You could take that narrative of the Malik Willis revenge game and throw it out the window because that's not a thing. But it is kind of funny that we're sitting here and it's week 3 and Malik Willis has a W and Will Levis has none. So that's kind of fun. Unless you're a Tennessee Titans fan, in which case it's kind of brutal. Speaking of 0-2 teams, how's that for a transition? The Bengals 0-2, the Ravens 0-2, and the Ravens with a tough matchup too against the Cowboys this week. So they've just come out of that gate here with a tough schedule, it seems like. So somebody's got to get a W here today. We hope. I think the Bengals are in a good position here. More on them later in the show against the Commanders. But what about these Ravens starting 0-2? A tough first assignment against the Chiefs on the road, but a winnable game last week that they did not win. Now they get the Cowboys after a tough loss they had at home. What do you make of this Cowboys-Ravens game today, Matt?
So the Ravens starting unexpectedly definitely throws a rock into the pool of wagering. So I think we could look for numbers to tick down in favor of those that want to wager on the Ravens. I still think they're definitely viable. And keep an eye on Wicks for Green Bay. I think he caught one last week. I definitely think he could be an anytime touchdown prop if the number's right.
Yeah, go the over on all the running props for the Packers and go under for the receiving props. That's an easy bet today. When we come back, who goes boom in week 3? We'll tell you right after this.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Daboll has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Daboll to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you here, getting you ready for Week 3 in the NFL, getting you ready season-long fantasy, waiver wire talk, booms, busts. We've got you. DFS talk coming up, straight up wagering the entire show. Joe, it's almost like you won a contest to be on this show. Now look at what you've made of yourself. It's absolutely amazing. Nice laugh. Nice sly laugh. Let's do FST Fantasy Booms. Last week, we were in there. We really had fun. A lot of people cashed on a lot of the stuff you were saying. Let's continue that trend here. Let's go right away. Kyler Murray has Detroit. You expect there is a boom coming here for Arizona?
I think so. Look, Arizona went out there that first week against Buffalo. And I know Kyler Murray only finished as QB 15 that week, but he also took 4 sacks in that game, right? Last week, he was the QB1 against the Rams. Now, the Rams also have their issues. We know that. But Detroit on the road, I think, is a different version of Detroit. Last week, we saw 266 passing yards for Kyler Murray and 59 rushing yards. That's back-to-back weeks with over 50 rushing yards from Kyler Murray. And he hasn't scored a rushing touchdown yet. And I want to emphasize yet because I think that might be coming today. So you have a unique situation where that first week, he really didn't target Marvin Harrison Jr. at all. That was different in week 2, and what a different result we get in that game. What a shock, right? He was our big buy low last week. Hopefully you listened because I think the window is pretty much shut right now on doing that the rest of the season. So Kyler Murray's in a good spot here with a game with a high total, a situation where you know he's going to run the football as well, especially with Aiden Hutchinson coming off that rush line because Aiden Hutchinson's been getting after guys and pushing guys out there in space. That's good for Kyler Murray and his rushing equity today because that means he's going to take off and run, which is why I like him to score a touchdown today as well, and that touchdown scorer prop. So that's a good number for him. So Kyler Murray has the opportunity today. Again, he's on Fantasy Pros as a top 4 overall ranked quarterback this week. You should pay attention to that. You should have him in your DFS lineups, and you should feel really good about him against the Detroit Lions in week 3 in a game that I think could approach 60 if things break right in that contest.
All right, there it is. Remember, this is the guy that sits down and personally writes the fantasy black book, especially when it comes to the quarterbacks. So that, to me, is getting it literally from the horse's mouth. You are now literally a horse, from what I've heard. Okay, Jordan Mason. You know what, man? Just pick it up from here. Now, Jordan Mason, if he's still around on fantasy waiver wires, I don't think he is. But overall, the wagering, let's see if the numbers are ready to catch up. What do we expect from Mason today on the road?
Well, first of all, I hope that you've been with us all season because we told you in week 1 to pick this guy up for free off the waiver wire. He was rostered in less than 30% of leagues when we told you to roster him, right? Just because what if something's not right or CMC gets a re-injury on that Monday Night Football game? Well, guess what? He never even made it to the Monday Night Football game. And ever since Jordan Mason has been a guy that you can feel really good about. Right now, this week, he is currently ranked as an RB1. He is ranked as RB4 this week on Fantasy Pros. And a big reason why is because of the injuries that they have sustained already early in the year. So you don't have CMC in this game, right? So that opens up all these carries. You don't have George Kittle. You don't have Deebo Samuel. You're down to Ayuk. You're down to Juwan Jennings. And you're down to Jordan Mason. Now, you're in a contest today against the Rams, and the Rams right now are a team that's been decimated on offense with injuries themselves. So they might give the 49ers a lot of opportunities. You're coming off a tough loss on the road. So what do? You go, you lick your wounds, you come back, and you try to run the football, be clever. And I think you're going to see a ton of Jordan Mason in today's game. So last 2 weeks, he's finished as RB3 and RB8. He's had 20 or more rushing attempts in each of those games. He's had 100 or more rushing yards to start both of the games to the season. I don't think there's anybody we can say that about right now in the NFL. One other person I think we can. But that is a pretty incredible start. Now, he's not going to catch the football. That's not going to be his thing, right? He's only got one catch, but it doesn't really matter with the one catch in each game. What matters is what he's been doing on the field. And so far, he has been getting the carries, establishing the run. He has touchdown equity. Again, I think Jordan Mason's in a good spot here. And if you're the 49ers, what you do is, because you're missing all these other weapons, you get a little basic here. It's fall. Yep. It's pumpkin spice latte season. It's time to get basic and run the football with Jordan Mason and let this guy carry you to a W.
Does that mean that signs point to an under, even though I wouldn't touch it? What are your thoughts on that?
It might, especially if the Rams offensive line just does not allow Stafford to look for anybody and give him enough time to find anybody. So, yeah, it certainly could, just from the sense of I don't know if the Rams can keep up their end of the bargain on their team total this week.
And then we look at halftime, and it's 45-42, and we laugh.
Problem.
Okay, Ja'Marr Chase, finally, this is it right here, right now, Joe? Yes or no?
Yeah, finally. You see how many targets Malik Neighbors got last week? Because that Washington Commanders secondary is not good. So it's time. It's time, Cincinnati Bengals, to walk the walk, because they've done a lot of talking, but they haven't done any winning yet. And I think it's time for Ja'Marr Chase to have that big day. Certainly things are statistically lined up for that. Also returning is T. Higgins, which I think frees Ja'Marr Chase up even more. So defenses now have to account for not one, but two very talented wide receivers. It's going to hurt Mike Gesicki probably. That T. Higgins return, more on that later on. But Ja'Marr Chase this week has a great opportunity. It's a primetime game. They're 0-2 back against the wall. They're going to get a bad Commanders defense. And so far, I mean, Baker Mayfield carved him up. Even Daniel Jones had success. Daniel Jones had success against you. I think things bode well for Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase. So get Chase in your lineups, obviously. Don't trade him. This is your last chance to trade for him. We'll talk about that later, because some people are really disenfranchised with him. But Chase has a big game, I think, on Monday night.
I think there's a place for Jaden Daniels to run amok, but let's see. All right, Sam Laporta at Arizona. We started talking about this game. Now we close talking about this game. Detroit at Arizona.
Yeah, Laporta, another guy, too, who, I think that first week, decent outing, 4 for 45. Then last week, just 2 for 13. That's not the Sam Laporta we know. I think against Arizona, a team that does struggle against the tight ends, this will be a good situation for him. So I'm looking for a bounce-back game for Laporta. I think he's very capable of it. He's only got 8 targets on the year so far, so that's not what you want. I think the coaching staff for the Detroit Lions is a very solid staff. They're going to look at what happened, what didn't happen, and say, okay, what do we need to do here? And one of those things is getting Laporta the football more and getting him some more targets. That's going to free up everybody else in this offense too. So the Lions have kind of gotten off to I think kind of a sluggish start to the year. This is a very dangerous game for them, because I think the Cardinals are very plucky. They already showed you they can go on the road to Buffalo and being competitive, and they were hyper competitive in that game all the way towards the end. And then last week came out with a big victory. The 2 wins these teams both have against the Rams. Now we're going to see who the best team really is. When we come back, who busts and be free, we'll let you know right here on FST.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get neighbors and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorlis told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Oh, I love it. I hope you can hear us laughing as we're coming in because we're having a good time, and we hope you are as well. FST, Fantasy Sports Today, Matt Striker, Joe Pisapia, and an incredible crew behind the glass, as well as all of you out there. We just got done doing fantasy booms, and we're starting to pick up on a theme here. We know certain games, listening to Joe Pisapia, we can start to understand what Joe thinks is going to happen here. Let's do fantasy busts, and let's talk about this Washington at Cincinnati game. Now, I know it's late. It's on its own slate. It's the Monday game, I believe, correct? Here's the thing, Joe, you believe Cincinnati will dominate. You believe that this next Washington wide receiver is a bust. So it keeps pointing back to me that the Washington quarterback might be a good play. But let's talk Terry McLaurin and his bustability for Monday.
Yeah, look, this is a tough situation here, I think, with a Bengals team that really needs a W. So I think Washington's kind of running into worst case scenario timing right here. But the good news is if they are behind, it's an opportunity for Jaden Daniels to really start letting loose with the football a little bit. And if you're down by 2 touchdowns, you got to start throwing the ball deep. He has one of the lowest ADOTs in the NFL right now, the average depth of target, because he hasn't really gotten the confidence yet to go deep, which is something he did very well in college. And he had a lot of receiver help to do it. And he's got receiver help here in Washington. The trouble is so far, it's a matter of confidence and a matter of getting comfortable at this level. And unfortunately, that's hurt Terry McLaurin here in the early going. There is a circumstance where that happens, and all of a sudden Terry McLaurin starts to pop a little bit in week 3. But until that happens, I think you're safer to bench him and look for some other guys that can help you a little bit more. I'm going to tell you the truth, even a guy like Juwan Jennings, who has an opportunity now as the number 2 wide receiver in this San Francisco 49er offense, he's probably a better start this week than Terry McLaurin this particular week, this particular matchup. So it's not that Terry McLaurin you should release and I should get rid of him. But it's taking a little time for Jaden Daniels to get comfortable throwing the football to people outside of the tight ends and the running backs. And you've got to get to a point here where eventually you let Jaden Daniels make some mistakes. Because if you're going to let a rookie start, they're going to make some mistakes. But he's got to get a little bit more disciplined to stay in the pocket and look for plays to develop. That's the other problem, too, is he's too quick to run sometimes. And that is going to take away a lot of those passing opportunities in the passing game for guys like Terry McLaurin to have successful fantasy days. So until further notice, and at least in week 3, I think Terry McLaurin's a guy that you can consider sitting based upon what else you have on your bench.
Man, I got to tell you, Joe, and I'm not just paying you lip service. It really is great to hear like that type of perspective because you're not going to hear that anywhere else where you kind of sit back and you fade all the noise and you go, yo, that actually makes sense. It's a young quarterback. He's going to panic, take time to adjust to the league. So I like when you bring that type of thinking forward. Let's apply that to Ezekiel Elliott. Has Baltimore? I think Baltimore wins the game, but I believe that the ship has sailed on Ezekiel Elliott from a fantasy perspective. There could still be some wagering viability if you can get it in the right place, but talk to me.
Look, I think Zeke is just about done. Last week, 6 carries for 16 yards, averaging less than 3 yards per carry, 2.7. This week, tough game against Baltimore. You saw Rico Dowdle last week start to get a little bit more. And these guys are back-to-back in the rankings this week, which I also think is very telling in the expert consensus rankings, where people are already hedging their bets a little bit. Now, last week, Rico looked better running the football. He certainly looks better catching the football, too. He had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 29 yards. So I'm looking for this backfield to start to shift and to shift towards Rico Dowdle. That's the guy that I want. And in a lot of leagues, people lost patience already and dropped Rico Dowdle. If so, you should be picking him up, because I do believe that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, you'll see that shift in this backfield more towards Rico Dowdle. Zeke will still probably get 5 to 10 carries a game, but I think Rico's the guy to take over in this backfield. Something has to change here for these Cowboys. They need a jolt, and Zeke, unfortunately, is just not it.
All right, let's talk recency bias here. Back to the Cincinnati-Washington game. There was a player whose name showed up, and you think people are going to run to him this week, and you're telling them they shouldn't. Take it away.
Well, we always say don't draft a team for last year, and don't play a team for last week. Last week, he had 7 catches for 91 yards, Mike Gesicki, and that was a tremendous performance, right? Now, he didn't even need the touchdown. He had 9 targets. Do those 9 targets come back with T. Higgins now returning against the Washington secondary? I don't think they do. So this is a tough sell for me. Now, if you're going to be without Evan Ingram this week and you need a desperation tight end, sure. You could stream Gesicki. Maybe you get lucky and he has a decent game. Maybe he gets to the end zone. That's fine. But in terms of starting him with confidence, I think you should be thinking twice about that, especially with the return potentially of T. Higgins and a matchup that really favors Jamar Chase. So Gesicki, great outing last week. If you had to stream him and you're happy about it, good. But don't live in the past in week 3. I think that could be a dangerous game to be playing. So those are the guys that could certainly let you down in week 3. And now we're going to focus our attentions to the daily fantasy pool. The guys that we want in our lineups that can help us get over pay line when we return.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Daboll has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Daboll to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get neighbors and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt Striker, Joe Pisapia with you here, giving you everything you need in order to dominate. All right, it's week 3. Let's start to really pad our bankroll. So by the time we're right in the middle of the season, we're playing with their money and we can make those outrageous wagers and they can hit. And now we're having fun. Speaking of having fun, let's dive into the DFS portion of this show here, because those that are playing and playing smart or smartly are finding a way to cash there as well. Let's talk about some of the top tier names. We'll talk about the prices, Joe, and then we'll try to get an idea of the game scripts overall. At the running back position, it starts at Saquon Barkley at 8,700. Then it pivots to Alvin Kamara at 8,400. So a $300 difference there, and Alvin Kamara has been hot. You can see that reflected in his anytime touchdown props on certain books, now moving deep into the minus money. And then there's our buddy Jordan Mason at 8,300. We'll stop right there and let you analyze Barkley, Kamara, and Mason.
Barkley is an interesting, expensive oppo play today because he's going against the New Orleans Saints defense. Now, they're the second-ranked rush defense, and you might kind of go, oh, wow, that's impressive, except for the fact that they faced the Carolina Panthers, who can't get any offense going whatsoever, and then they faced Ezekiel Elliott last week. So is it really that impressive? I'm not sure. So maybe going against the grain here is an interesting way to go. Barkley coming off a disappointing end to that Monday night game. I think there's opportunity here with this Eagles team to get back on track without A.J. Brown continuing to push Saquon Barkley heavily. Now, I know it's a short week for them coming off that Monday night game too, but all the reason more why he is a really interesting, I think, low rostered play who has far more upside than people realize against the Saints today. So just keep that in your back pocket. A game that I think the Saints can win, but at the same time, a game that I think Barkley's going to work much better than maybe people realize. Alvin Kamara certainly worked out last week. We were on Alvin Kamara last week, and guess what? He did not disappoint. Now the question is that all the Alvin Kamara touchdowns we get for the next month and a half? Sometimes he likes to score them in clusters. We've seen that before. Hopefully that's not the case. It's the next 3 guys on this list, though, I think that are most appealing in terms of return on investment. Jordan Mason, we just talked about him in the Booms segment of the show. The 49ers are limited this week. No Debo, no Kittle, no CMC, right? You got to run the football. He's got 20 or more touches. You know the volume's going to be there. Mason's a lock for me. If you're the Colts, you got to get back to running the football. I think you got away from it last week. Not enough Jonathan Taylor. I think it cost you the game. You come back home. You give the ball to Jonathan Taylor this week. You right the ship, and I think you establish the run, and it takes a little pressure off Richardson. I think that's a good practice here for Shane Steichen. And then last is Devon Achane, who everybody's writing off this Dolphins team. I expect the Dolphins to cover. I expect the Dolphins to be in this game. I would not be shocked if the Dolphins win. Seattle's played very well, but they played the Broncos and the Patriots. So before we start anointing them the kings of the North here, what are we doing? Like, come on. Let's step back a little bit here. And before we start putting guys and teams in like, oh, like the Seahawks have totally turned things around. Maybe let's see it against a real team. And I know the Dolphins theoretically are, without their starting quarterback, and Skylar Thompson is a downgrade. We all understand that. But can he just be good enough to service the offense and get Tyreek Hill the football and hand the ball out to Devon Achane, who, by the way, has some extra time off here after playing last Thursday. So a little bit extra time, a little bit extra rest. That's a good thing for Achane. So I love Achane, love Taylor, love Mason. Those are 3 guys I'd circle the most in my DFS lineups this week.
All right, interesting take there. A pity shift from Carolina to Miami. Joe saying he expects Miami to cover, maybe even win. We'll keep an eye on that for sure. Let's talk wide receivers now. Hey, Mike Evans. Man, we have talked about Mike Evans leading up to the start of the season, first week, and here he is at 8,300. Right behind him is Rashee Rice, but a drop-off of $1,000, 7,300. Then there's Malik Neighbors, who you had mentioned played against a softer secondary, as you will, so maybe there's some recency bias there. Last week, 7,100 on Neighbors. Chris Godwin, 6,600, a pivot away from the top. And then there's Jawan Jennings at 5,200, where opportunity is abound. Joe, what do you like?
Look, Evans is always intriguing, but I think the interesting pivot is down to 6,600 for Godwin. Same team, same offense, maybe a better corner matchup too. Godwin out of that slot has been terrific. If you look at what he's done so far this year, and in back-to-back games, he has been a target hog. That's what you're looking for. He had 8 targets 2 weeks in a row, caught 7 in week 1, 8 in week 2. has a touchdown in both games as well. So he's been a tremendous return on investment. Can he go 3 weeks in a row? I think he can. And I think that move back to the slot has been exactly what the doctor ordered. So it's a really good move here by the coaching staff. Baker Mayfield's played fantastic. Juwan Jennings at 5,200. He's going to be highly rostered, but I don't think it's wrong. If you're looking for another guy who is even cheaper on FanDuel and on DraftKings, is Jordan Whittington, who's a big splash playmaker guy. You saw flashes of it in the preseason. And a lot of us were going, oh, look, did the Rams find another one of these Puka Nacua type guys out of nowhere that nobody, if one organization is really good at identifying that type of underappreciated, undervalued, splashy player, it's the Rams at that position of wide receiver. So DeMarcus Robinson, sure. Tyler Johnson, we'll see. But I think it comes down to a guy like Whittington, who is really cheap. And if he has that one big play or one big touchdown catch, could return investment. Rashee Rice for 7,300. I think that's going to be a bit of a dogfight. I think you saw the awakening of the Atlanta Falcons offense this Monday night. They started to put things together. Everything's going to be just fine. It just took a little while. That first game, you had to shake the dust off. And look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a good defensive team, and they always will be a good defensive team. And then Malik Neighbors, who I don't think he's going to get 75 targets like he did last week, but I think he's going to get enough in this game where, once again, the volume is king, right? So Rice, Neighbors, Godwin, I think that's a really good place to live. And if you're looking for some cheap offset guys, Juwan Jennings, Jordan Whittington, I think are two guys that you want to circle as well.
All right. So now, depending on how you've allocated your resources, here we are at the quarterback position. Most people build out, but the way that we've structured this segment is there's a reason for it. So let's start Lamar Jackson here, 8,800. What would you have to do to work Lamar Jackson into a formidable lineup? It's a question that you have to ask yourself. The pivot then from there is Kyler Murray, but the difference is only 500. He cost you 8,300. I like the Derek Carr landing spot of 7,900. I think it allows me to do a lot more. Baker Mayfield, one of your favorites, Joe, at 7,700. And then there's Kirk Cousins at 7,200. The bottom half of this list really gives you some flexibility to build. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely looking at pivot points here again, too, because if you look at the structure of that, yeah, Lamar is very expensive today. The good thing about Lamar is you don't necessarily have to put him with anybody. You can just run him out by himself and still kind of keep all of the points from that offense, whether he's rushing touchdowns or whether he is throwing touchdowns. Baker Mayfield, I think a really interesting play this week. Another guy that I feel really good about. Kyler Murray, I mentioned, again, 2 weeks in a row, 50 yards rushing. So a much better passing day out of him last week. I think that carries over as well. Kirk Cousins, I think undervalued, underappreciated. You saw the Falcons start to put things together. That's encouraging. He's got Pitts. He's got Drake London. He's got Bijan Robinson. He's got help. So why not Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr, another guy too, who, if you look even on the DK side, Derek Carr is just 5,800. He's even cheaper than Baker Mayfield. So I think that there's a lot of pivot points. I think on DK, Carr is my favorite cheap quarterback. I think on FanDuel, Baker Mayfield, my favorite one. And in terms of pairings, you can go look for another big game with Rashid Shaheed. You can go with Olave if you're going with Carr, or you can go with Kamara. I think there's no problem with that. You want to maintain that offense a little bit. And then if you turn things around there with Baker Mayfield, I think Godwin is the lock guy with him. That's the one that I would want the most in terms of pairing.
Yeah, definitely smart. All right, we'll close it out with the tight ends. Remember, a touchdown makes you a tight end one. Joe, where are you going? What are you spending?
Yeah, look, Laporte on the bounce back is interesting. Again, very expensive. That's the problem. Trey McBride at 6,800. Another guy that I think is going to work a lot today. Brock Bowers is kind of the sweet spot for me. That's the one where he's been terrific. I think people are still a little slow onto how good he has been so far this year. Kyle Pitts has touchdown equity. Schoonmaker, depending on the health of Ferguson, we'll see as we get more news what's going on there. But no matter who's playing tight end for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott finds them. It's been historically since he was a rookie, when it was back to Jason Witten. He always looks for his tight end. So no matter who's playing tight end in Dallas, it's a viable spot in fantasy. We come back. It's time to make some trades. Improve your fantasy team when we return.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Soros told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here. Reminder, at SportsGrid TV is the social media handle. Before the break coming in, we're all talking about the wagers that we're thinking about making. And Joe says, too, especially with parlays, man, when you go more than 2, you're asking for trouble. And I'm with you, Joe, and it makes it so hard because some of these 4-leg parlays just look so enticing and the return is so great.
Fine.
You're right.
You could still do that.
Like
no one's saying you can't. But the more variance you add, the more you're giving the opportunity to lose. I mean, it's just sad. I know everybody. And look, and sometimes I've hit a couple big ones in my life. Matt has too. But, look, you're better off taking the 2 things you like the most and going heavier than putting the 10 spot on the 10-leg parlay and hoping and dreaming for things to go well.
Who's playing 10 legs? All right.
And I approve it. I approve this message.
We'll bring it back to earth here. It's time for buy low, sell high. But I think all the conversations are the same, right? You want to be smart. You want to be smart in your investments. You want to be smart in your choices you make in life. You want to be smart in how you wager, how you manage your teams. So let's talk about great candidates here. Jamar Chase has been on the tip of everyone's tongue. Polarizing player, controversial. Joe, you have him as a buy low candidate here. Convince me.
Well, look, I mean, Jamar Chase is one of the most traded guys in the first 2 weeks of the season. People were panicking because of the contract drama. Let's get back to the contract for a second. The guy needs a contract, right? What do you think Jamar Chase is going to do? You think he's going to not show up this season to get paid? I mean, come on. Let's be honest. Remind me, everybody, how did CeeDee Lamb's beginning of 2023 go? It was pretty quiet, wasn't it? He was one of the most traded players, wasn't he? How did the last 10 games of that season go for CeeDee Lamb? That's the kind of ending you could see here for Jamar Chase. This is the beginning of it against Washington. This is last week we told you Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to bounce back, and he had 130 yards basically at a halftime. So I'm telling you right now, this is your window. If you want to pull off a trade this morning for Jamar Chase, now's the time to do it. It's a great matchup. After this, the window is going to be shut. It's going to be locked. It's going to have those things you put down in Florida where Craig Mish lives, where you put the shutters over them. That's it. It's going to be over. It's going to be done. Hurricane season's coming. So, and the Hurricane is Jamar Chase. And I think the return of Higgins helps. It can only assist him in that as well. Another guy, too, I'm going to throw out here, too, before we talk about the next guy, is Jalen Waddle, because I have seen more questions in the last 48 hours with trades involving getting rid of Jalen Waddle. Stop. Calm down. Pump the brakes, because it's still the Dolphins' offense. Let's see what Skylar Thompson with preparation can do. Not every matchup is going to be the best, but not everyone's going to be the worst. And I'm not sold that this first one is the worst for him. I'm just not there yet. So if it's Tyler Huntley, if it's Skylar Thompson, it's still Mike McDaniel at the end of the day. And I believe in that offense. So if you can get Jalen Waddle on the cheap, because it seems like everybody's selling, I think you should be buying on the cheap wherever you can.
All right, a little bonus one there. Now let's switch over to a team that has a young, exciting quarterback. At times that could penalize a receiver on that team, but other times it becomes a benefit if and when that quarterback matures. Terry McLaurin is that guy. He's a buy low candidate. Joe, what kind of deal would a Terry McLaurin manager be looking for if they were willing to send him?
Yeah, look, I think for McLaurin, you can get him pretty cheap right now. If you look at some of the wide receivers, like right now, Rashid Shaheed's had 2 great weeks, 2 big splash plays, right? But who would you want the rest of season? I mean, some people just want Shaheed because it's happening right now. But historically speaking, McLaurin's been the much better player over his career. So a lot of this is the faith of Jaden Daniels figuring it out, which I think he's going to. Again, we're only in week 2. We got to give this guy a little time here, now that it's week 3, to start to look downfield, to start to understand the progressions better. The NFL is a very fast game, and he is right now breaking loose and running around a lot. Eventually, it will settle down. I do believe that, and I think that becomes a really interesting buy opportunity for him. If you look at some guys that have disappointed, I mean, would you rather have Stephon Diggs rest of season, or would you rather have Terry McLaurin? I think that's a question we can ask ourselves. That first game was pretty good for Diggs with the 2 touchdowns. Last week was pretty quiet. Again, he is behind Nico Collins. There's no doubt about that. Would you rather have, I think maybe DeAndre Hopkins or Terry McLaurin rest of season? I think I'd rather have Terry McLaurin with the upside potentially that he brings. So when it comes to buying some of these players, you have to recognize it might take some patience too, but the player in the marketplace right now is devalued. And I think that's an opportunity where it'd be Waddle, Chase, or McLaurin to buy on some of those wide receivers.
All right, now let's talk about selling some players that have had everyone in a tizzy, but Joe thinks it's time to cool down. Let's go to New Orleans here. Now, I believe that their strength of schedule, it's in their favor, so I believe that some of the players will remain viable, but right now some of them are just as hot as they're going to be. Let's talk, Joe. Who would you sell from New Orleans?
Yeah, I think with Shaheed, it's one of those things where, can he keep making the big splash play every single week? 2 weeks, 2 big touchdowns. Maybe this has just become the identity of the New Orleans Saints. Awesome. That's fun. But that's not necessarily been who the Saints were. And once again, we have to take advantage of the matchups. Now, the secondary matchup that first week against Carolina was very favorable, right? That Carolina is a hot mess. Last week, a little bit more impressive against the Dallas Cowboys. But is it something we can rely on every week? Can you sell him for above market value? And I think that is where it becomes intriguing. Would I rather have Jalen Waddle rest of season or Rashid Shaheed? I think I'd rather have Jalen Waddle, and I think that's a deal you could pull off right now. And people might be surprised at that, but that's what happens so often where people just – I saw somebody turn Allen Lazard into Devontae Adams 2 weeks ago, and that was, again, something that should never, ever, ever happen in fantasy. I saw it. I made the person send me a screenshot of it because it was so absurd. Now, you shouldn't be vetoing trades, but you also shouldn't be making those kind of trades either. And the last guy on that list, too, Zach Moss, is another one, too, that I think you consider selling. Still has some cachet in that backfield for the Bengals, but I do believe the Bengals are going to be a very heavy pass offense. And with all the running back injuries that we've already had, maybe Zach Moss is a guy that you might be able to get something back for that could be pretty useful. So keep that in mind as you're looking to go ahead and sell off some players. What you're looking for is slow starts, underperformance, talent. That's what you want to buy. And what you have to have those hard conversations when you look at your roster, you have to say to yourself, what do I see here that doesn't make sense? What has been far better than I could have imagined? And is it for real or is it just a fantasy? And at the end of the day, I think too often we get so excited about the prospect of being the smartest person in the room and being right, as opposed to making the good decisions to be right in the future. When we come back, the deep dive on SportsGrid.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get neighbors and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports. Today, Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here, and it's time now for the FST Deep Dive. And Joe, I got to tell you, I absolutely love this. I think this is really going to blow people's minds. And if you play this right, you can really, really pad your pocket. So let's take a deep dive into passing overall over the last handful of seasons throughout football. Passing touchdowns through 2 weeks. We'll look at it in 2019, and then we'll take it all the way down to 2024. And this stat is remarkable, Joe. Let's take it away. Passing touchdowns through the first 2 weeks in football, starting in 2019 to now.
Yeah, well, it's become a passing league, right? The NFL over the last 10 years. We've had to adjust our fantasy rosters around that. But something has changed in the last couple years, a few things. And if you look at the stats, it really bears things out. Take a look here, starting at 2019. Right? In the first 2 weeks of the season, 105 touchdowns. Well, the following year, 110 in 2021. In 2022, 105. And in 2023, it took a severe dip all the way to 86. And this year, through 2 weeks, just 69 passing touchdowns.
What?
So what's going on
What happened
right
between
now?
2022 and 2023? Did someone come into the league? Was there a rules change? What happened?
Well, what's come into the league is a lot of youth at the quarterback position. Right? A lot of youth, a lot of inexperience. You've also got a different style of quarterback, and that style of quarterback is one that's more athletic, more apt to run. So we're also rushing for touchdowns a little bit more, right? So the adage of sometimes looking at fantasy quarterbacks and saying, oh, you can wait on the late quarterback and all that stuff. The age of the Phillip Rivers is over. You know, those guys that you felt really good, those passing pocket guys that just would sit there and sling the ball around for 4,400 yards and throw for 30 touchdowns every year. They were just fine to get at the end of drafts. Matthew Stafford, prime years in Detroit, that kind of situation. That's all fading into the distance right now. Instead, you're getting a lot more of the athletic quarterback, a lot more of the diverse styles in the NFL that you're seeing. And passing touchdowns have gone down considerably because of that. So you've even seen some offenses that have been a little bit more gimmicky. A little bit more like you would see sometimes in some college situations when you get down to the goal line too. So there's a lot of factors at play here, but the biggest one is the youth and inexperience of the quarterback position. You're seeing more rookies play than ever who maybe aren't ready to play. And as this continues to set into the NFL, Matt, I think it's going to bear the question over the next year or two. Watching Caleb Williams struggle, watching Bryce Young struggle, watching Will Levis struggle, watching a lot of these guys struggle. Maybe it's better to have these guys sit with a clipboard for the first year. If you look at the guy in the box there in the graphic for this conversation, it's Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. Patrick Mahomes then went on to be one of the great quarterbacks ever. Now, he's got all the talent, all the skill set. But how much do you learn in terms of confidence and gain in terms of understanding just by being around and absorbing it from a good veteran ahead of you? And I think it's a question a lot of these organizations have to ask themselves. Everybody's emphasis is so much on winning and winning now, and we put this draft pick capital and all the money into this guy. He's got to start week one. He's got to be the star from week one. And that's just a lot to put on a young man to come into the NFL and take that ball and run with it. I think it's smart what the Patriots are doing. I think the plan that the Minnesota Vikings had was smart to let's just give the kid his own time to start to get ready. Matt, what do you think is the biggest contributor to this passing number being down so much in passing touchdowns in the last 2 years and such a strong trend?
No, you hit the nail on the head with that, with regards to the youth influx into the league, the changing of the game, young head coaches coming in, just a younger mentality overall. I mean, you could think about it, the next generation will lead. But during my time in wrestling, especially in WWE, there was this term that we'd use for wrestlers that were really, really good. They weren't ready for TV, too green for TV. And what it means is that you're still making mistakes. You don't want the world to see those mistakes, because in the pro wrestling world, sometimes they don't forgive you so easily. But same here in football now. You're seeing an influx of youth in a lot of sports, but they're allowed to make their mistakes in front of everyone. So do we either alter the game so those mistakes aren't as painful and embarrassing, or do we find a different way to let these young kids mature? So, Joe, I think you're right. Sitting with a clipboard, learning, to me, experience is the greatest tool in the world. But we live in an age where that's not the case.
Yeah.
These quarterbacks are too green for TV, and the stats are showing.
Well, it's interesting, Matt, because you either have patience in the beginning and it works out, or you end up like the Carolina Panthers are now, which is in this cycle. Same thing with the Bears might be, right? Well, we took Justin Fields. We got to play him right away. Everything's got to work out. And then it doesn't. And then we're right back in that draft again, trying to find the next guy who's going to work out. And it becomes this vicious cycle. And what's better at the end of the year? Is it better to take a year of patience and look ahead? Or is it better to put everything in there and have to be back in the draft again? Good conversation. We'll be back here with more on FS2.
You say this is a smash, I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Daboll has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Daboll to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.